I hope you're doing well and staying safe, and that you're ready for July. And if not, then maybe this July Plan With Me video can help with that. Jumping right in, the first page I'm going to go through with you is my July cover. And I'm actually going to use some black and white images that I printed out for the month, because they have a really fun fantasy feel to them, and I really like that thing, so I decided I was just gonna go with it for the entire month. Unfortunately, I later realized that one of the images I printed out was just too big to fit on the page and have the calendar on there as well, so I decided to cut it down a little to make it fit, and I still use the top part in a later spread. You'll see that later. And since all my images are actually black and white, I decided to add a little bit of color using some green scrapbooking paper. I think that the green tones are muted enough not to distract from the other images that I'm using in the spread, while still allowing them to pop a little bit more because it adds a little bit of extra color. I then went in with some blue iridescent paint to add a little bit of sparkle to the swan, and I'll show you more how shiny that is when I've actually completed the spread, which is gonna happen very soon. And I also added a little bit of silver, just to add a little bit of extra sparkle as well. Now, despite all this extra sparkle, I still felt that the spread could benefit from something a little bit extra to add a little bit more spice to the spread. And I ended up going with this fantasy-themed washi tape that I thought went really well with the rest of the fantasy theme of the spread. Now, the final touch was adding just a few stars over the green paper in blue and silver to match the other muted neutral tones in the rest of the spread, and to add a little looking forward to section again in a matching silver color at the beginning of the month. And this is actually something that I started doing as I started bullet journaling, and I find that it actually really helps me to get more excited for the month, so I really enjoy it. Remember when I said that I was going to use that castle that I cut off for the previous spread in another spread? Well, I didn't want to wait very long because I really liked it, so I used it in the very next spread. And, just like in the previous spread, I used a little bit of scrapbooking paper as a backing for it and to add a little bit of color. Except this time the scrapbooking paper is actually in blue. And I decided to match that with some more fantasy-themed washi tape. Now, full disclosure, I actually have a few of these that I got fairly recently, and I was really excited to use them, so you're actually going to see them a bunch of times in this video. Now, at this point, the spread had two blue elements, so I pretty much accidentally stumbled onto a blue theme for this spread. And I decided I wasn't going to fight fate, so I just went with it. So I added a bit more blue-toned washi tape, and of course I added my blue iridescent sparkly paint, just to add, well, a little bit of sparkle to the spread, and I also wanted to match the blue castle in the washi tape at the top right corner. And my final touches for this spread were pretty much the headings and a few stickers. As for the headings, they're goals and review, which is pretty much what this spread is all about. So basically, I'm going to write down my goals for the month, and at the end of the month, I'm going to do a little review and figure out how well I did in terms of actually accomplishing these goals. This next spread. To be honest, this one was actually a learning experience for me, and not in a good way. It was a learning experience for me in the sense that I figured out what I won't be doing again, and that is using watercolor just in my journal, or rather in my very cheap lined notebook that I use as my journal. And the reason for that is that I actually tested it out, but I tested it out in a very small patch, so for some reason I thought that it would be okay to do a full watercolor spread. And boy, was that actually a mistake. First of all, the watercolor just didn't behave the way that I wanted it to behave, so I had a lot of trouble getting it to look how I wanted it to look. And second, it actually wrinkled the pages a lot more than I thought it would. And I would have been fine with that for this spread, but I didn't think about the fact that it would actually wrinkle the spread that I did previously. And that I was pretty disappointed about. In any case, you live and you learn, And I was actually able to salvage the spread to the point where I quite liked how it turned out. Still didn't like what it did to the previous spread, but I definitely did like this one. And I was pretty much able to do that by adding a whole lot of washi tape and a whole lot of stickers to it. Basically, I added some crane washi tape in a sort of fantasy theme to match the fantasy theme of my fairy black and white picture. And after that, I just spent a bunch of time trying to figure out what stickers would work best with it. And I finally settled on a black and white flower to match the black and white toned fairy picture, a gold flower to match the gold in the crane washi tape, and a couple of vintagey, steampunky themed stickers. Ironically, the heading for this spread is Best of the Month. It definitely wasn't the best of the month when it comes to looks and my feelings towards how it looks, but it's still going to be a really good spread for me to fill out because I kind of tend to be a bit of a negative person, and I think that a Best of the Month spread really helps me to focus on the positive rather than the negative. So if you're anything like me, then I think it's a really good spread to have in your bullet journal. Next comes my tracker spread. And the funny thing about this spread is that I actually had to leave on that particular day 20 minutes from the point when I started it. It was the last spread that I was doing that day, so I knew I only had 20 minutes to complete it. It was quite a challenge, but I managed it, and I actually liked it more than the previous spread, which took me way longer. I pretty much went with a black and purple theme with a little bit of gold to add a little bit of sparkle in the form of washi tape and stickers, which you'll see in a bit. And I went with those colors because I pretty much based the whole spread around the two pieces of scrapbooking paper that you saw me use in the very beginning. So the piece of brick scrapbooking paper and the piece of moth purple scrapbooking paper. On the left is pretty much going to be a little line graph to indicate how I'm doing for each of the habits that I will be tracking, and on the right you see the habits that I will be tracking. And I'll be using a different color for each habit to keep track of them. So this next spread is actually really simple, and it didn't take me that long, but it's my favorite from the entire video. And it's the first part of my first weekly spread for the month, and I will show you the entire weekly spread, which is actually made up of 3 spreads. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because I realized last month that I just didn't have enough space for things, and I also wanted to try to add a few more sections to my week to see if it would help me get more organized. Anyways, back to what's actually happening in my setup. Now, I normally like to build my spreads around something a little bit more interesting, but this time I actually built them around just plain blue scrapbooking paper with just a little bit of texture to it. And to match that, I added some of my favorite sort of dreamy washi tape, which has a little bit of a fantasy feel to it, so it sort of matches my theme of the month. Regardless, I really like how it looks in this spread, and it's actually one of my favorite tapes, or tape sets. And to keep the dreamy theme going, I splattered a little bit of silver paint to sort of represent stars and added a little silver moon to the spread, and finally added a big red flower sticker to add a little bit of contrast. While the previous spread may have been a little questionable, I definitely kept the fantasy theme going for this one. And I did that by starting with this mermaid-themed scrapbooking paper in a sort of light peachy color. Now, since the scrapbooking paper is actually so busy, I knew that I wanted to complement it with a black and white image, and I chose this sort of fantasy lady picture. I'm not sure how to call it. Maybe it's a fairy, maybe it's a goddess, whatever your interpretation is. And while I really liked how these two elements looked together, I knew that I wanted to add something more to make the spread more interesting, which is kind of a common theme for me. And after trying a whole bunch of different pieces, I finally settled on this silver metallic, almost mirror finish paper. And I actually went with it because despite the fact that it's really shiny, the color is light enough so that I felt that it didn't actually detract from the other elements in the spread. And yet, it was definitely bright enough to make things more interesting. Then it was time for the final touches, which was a black and white sticker to add a little bit of something extra to the left corner of the spread, and my headings, which you can see include a best of the week section. And I pretty much added that for the same reason I added it to my monthly section, and it's basically just to keep me more positive and to keep me looking at the good things that happen rather than the bad. And we've reached the final spread that I'm going to show you in this video, which is actually the final spread of the first week of the month. And here I'm definitely continuing the fantasy theme with the sort of fantasy leafy divider. And I think you might be starting to see a pattern here, but of course I had to use some scrapbooking paper to add a little bit of color. And I'm actually using the same green scrapbooking paper that I used in the very first spread of this month. So I guess I've come full circle. And you also might remember that I said that you would see that fantasy-themed washi tape quite a bit more in this video, and here it is. I'm using it in this spread 3 times. But I just think that it works really well with my fantasy theme, and let's be frank, it's new and it's pretty, so I'm gonna use it a lot. And the rest of the spread I pretty much just covered with a whole bunch of stickers. This is actually an unusual number of stickers for me to use in a single spread, but I really wanted to make the spread more interesting, and I thought that the stickers really helped to make it pop more, and I think that they worked fairly well. And they're fairly neutral because all the stickers I used are actually black and white, so I think they would work with any spread, and especially with this one. Of course, I'm finishing things off with my headings for the days of the week in a matching black color. And that was it for this video. I have to say that this is probably my favorite theme out of all the bullet journaling themes I've done so far, so I really hope that you enjoyed it too, and that you generally liked this video and found it useful. And if you did, please give it a thumbs up, it really means the world to me. Possibly subscribe if you want to see more videos like this from me. And of course, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Have a fantastic July. Be you, always. Bye!